At dawn, a young farmer released 40 ducks into a paddy everyone called worthless. His neighbors laughed. 2 harvests later, none of them were laughing anymore. Haruto Kobayashi stood ankle-deep in mud at 5 in the morning, holding a wooden crate that rattled with the soft complaints of 40 ducklings. Steam rose off the flooded paddy behind him. 3 months earlier, this field had been listed as worthless on his grandfather's estate papers. Now he was about to do something no one in Kuretani village, on the coastal plain outside Niigata City, had done in 11 years. He wore his grandfather's rubber boots, 2 sizes too big, the toes stuffed with newspaper to keep his feet from sliding. He opened the crate. The ducklings tumbled into the water, quacking, paddling in uneven circles before finding their rhythm. Haruto watched them for a long moment. His grandfather, Kenzo, had died in March, for months after Haruto moved back from Tokyo to help him. Haruto had been finishing a shift at the print shop where he still worked part-time, telling himself one more week wouldn't matter. He arrived home the day after the funeral. He never told his mother why he was 3 days late. She never asked twice. His mother, Emi, wanted to sell the land. Fujimori Ren, a representative from Nihon Agricultural Holdings, had been calling since the week of the funeral, offering 9 million yen for the 1.2 hectares, more than the family had earned from the paddy in a decade. "It's a fair price for land that isn't producing," Fujimori said over tea in the kitchen, his voice pleasant, unhurried. "Your grandfather stopped farming it seriously years ago. Everyone in the valley knows that." "I don't," Haruto said. Fujimori only smiled. 3 other families on the valley road had already sold their plots to Nihon Kai in the past 2 years. Haruto's cousin, who'd once talked about running the farm with him someday, had taken a salary job in Niigata City instead and hadn't mentioned the land since. The paddy itself had produced almost nothing for 6 years, a few sacks of low-grade rice a season, barely worth the diesel to harvest it. Selling made every kind of sense. Emi had already signed the preliminary papers. She needed only Haruto's signature to finish it, since the land had passed to both of them equally. But Haruto had found the diary. It was in the tool shed, under a stack of rusted trowels, in his grandfather's cramped handwriting. Most pages were about weather and fertilizer costs. One entry, dated 11 years back, stopped him, "Released the ducks today. 40 of them. If this works, we won't need the chemicals anymore. If it doesn't," the sentence ended there. The 8 pages after it had been torn out. He asked his mother about it. She looked at the wall behind him instead of at his face. "Your grandfather tried something foolish once," she said. "It cost him more than the money. Leave it alone." He didn't leave it alone. At the far edge of the paddy stood a section his grandfather had fenced off years before, sagging wire wrapped around a padlocked gate. Weeds grew waist-high behind it. No one explained why that corner stayed sealed while the rest of the land, unused as it was, at least stood open. Haruto tried the padlock. It held. Old Sato, who farmed the plot next door, leaned on the fence the morning the ducks went in. He'd known Kenzo for 50 years. "Ducks belong in a pot," he said, "not in a paddy. Your grandfather learned that the hard way, and he was smarter than you." Haruto said nothing back. Sato shook his head and walked off. Word spread fast in a village of 200 people. By the second week, half of Kuretani had found a reason to walk past the Kobayashi paddy and watch the ducks work the mud, trampling weeds, hunting leafhoppers and snails, stirring the shallow water until it turned the color of milk tea. Haruto had read enough about the method to know the theory. He had never done it. In the 4th week, he woke to find 11 ducks dead. A fox had gotten through a gap in the netting on the paddy's north side. The side 16-year-old Kenji Aoyama, the boy Haruto had hired for morning feedings, was supposed to have latched the night before. Kenji swore he had closed it. Haruto wanted to believe him. He wasn't sure he did. He needed to know whether his grandfather's failure, whatever it had actually been, was about to repeat itself. He drove 40 minutes to the Prefectural Agricultural Extension Office and found Ogawa Michiko, an advisor who had spent a career studying Aigamo farming, the practice, generations old across rural Japan, of using ducks to work a rice paddy instead of chemicals. She explained it plainly. Ducklings go in about 2 to 3 weeks after transplanting, once the rice is rooted enough to survive their weight underfoot. The ducks eat weeds and insects, stir the mud with their bills and feet to keep it oxygenated, and fertilize the soil as they move through it. They have to come out before the rice heads form in late summer, or they'll eat the grain along with everything else. Timing matters more than anything. And the netting has to be buried into the mud, not just staked along the surface, or a fox will find the seam in one night. Your grandfather's netting was staked, not buried, Ogawa said, checking an old regional loss record. There was heavy rain that same week. The flood pooled deepest in the low corner near the eastern dike. A fox got in during the storm and killed most of the flock overnight. He fenced that corner off afterward and never opened it again. So it hadn't been foolishness. It had been grief he never wrote down. That October, with fewer ducks working fewer weeds after the fox got through, the section nearest the damaged fence choked with growth the rest of the paddy didn't have. The harvest came to 2,050 kilograms, respectable for the land's recent history, not enough to matter. Sold at the ordinary mill price of 310 yen a kilogram, it came to 635,500 yen. Better than any year since his grandfather's decline. Not enough to make his mother stop asking him to sign the papers. Over the winter, Haruto read the diary from the first page to the last, copying his grandfather's fertilizer notes into a fresh notebook and adding Ogawa's corrections in the margins. In March, a year after the funeral, he buried new netting 8 centimeters into the mud along every meter of fence line, doubling the sections his grandfather had only staked. He started the organic certification paperwork in April, months before he'd need it, so the 11-week wait wouldn't cost him a season twice. The second flock went in that May, 60 ducklings this time. By July, the weeds that had survived the year before were gone, cleared out along with the leafhoppers that had once needed 3 separate chemical treatments. The water ran clear instead of clouded with algae. He sold his first batch of pasture-raised duck eggs, unheard of in Kuretani, to a specialty grocer in the city for 480 yen a dozen, 4 times the going rate for ordinary eggs. It came to 34,000 yen. His first income from the land that had ever felt like his own. He put the bills in an envelope and didn't spend them. The organic certification itself cost 180,000 yen, and he didn't have it until he sold 2 mature ducks to a Tokyo restaurant that specialized in Japanese-raised duck at 6,000 yen a bird. In August, half the flock came down with a respiratory infection. Ogawa walked him through isolating the sick birds and lowering the water level to slow the spread, and only 3 ducks were lost. Then, in early September, Fujimori raised his offer to 11 million yen and delivered it in person, standing at the edge of the paddy in city shoes sinking into the mud. "You're not doing this for the land," Haruto said, surprising himself. "You never once look at the rice. You look at that corner." He nodded toward the padlocked section. Fujimori's face didn't change, but he left without answering. That night, Haruto searched the diary again and found, tucked flat into the spine, a folded land survey more than 30 years old. The Fujimori family name was on it, as the previous owners of the plot beside Kenzo's, land Nihonkai Agricultural Holdings, had absorbed decades earlier after a bad harvest and a bank debt neither family had ever spoken of since. Fujimori Ren wasn't only closing a business deal. He was trying to finish something his own father had started and lost. By late September, the rice stood heavy and gold, close to harvest. Sato mentioned, almost to himself, that the swallows had been flying low for 2 days and the crows had gone quiet, signs his own grandfather used to watch before a storm. That evening's forecast confirmed it, a typhoon approaching the coast, expected to make landfall within 36 hours. Haruto spent the night reinforcing the paddy's dike walls with sandbags, working alongside Kenji, who arrived without being asked and didn't leave until 3 in the morning. The typhoon came ashore the following evening, wind and sheeting rain that didn't let up for 6 hours. Sato's neighboring field, its stalks grown tall and soft on heavy synthetic fertilizer, lodged almost completely. By morning nearly a third of his crop lay flattened in standing water. 2 other fields down the valley lost even more. The Kobayashi paddy held. Grown without the nitrogen overload that made stalks tall and brittle, its rice stood shorter, its roots aerated all summer by ducks long since sold to market. It bent hard in the wind. It didn't break. In the worn-out quiet after the storm, Kenji finally told him about the fox, more than a year late. He hadn't left the gate open by accident. Fujimori had offered him 20,000 yen the week before it happened, back when Kenji's mother needed money for a hospital bill he'd never told anyone about. He'd unlatched one gate, telling himself it was a small thing. Watching 11 ducks dead the next morning had made him sick with it, and he'd stayed quiet out of shame rather than say so. Haruto listened, was quiet for a while, then told him the netting work all that second summer had more than settled it. Kenji kept working the paddy through harvest. Harvest day came 4 days after the storm. Before the trucks arrived, Haruto finally cut the old padlock at the eastern corner and pulled the sagging fence down, letting the sealed-off ground breathe again for the first time in 11 years. He brought in 3,400 kilograms of certified organic koshihikari, sold at 1,150 yen a kilogram to a distributor supplying restaurants across Niigata and Tokyo, 3.9 million yen from the rice alone. Between the eggs, the mature ducks sold through the season, and a new standing contract with a Tokyo restaurant, the total passed 12 million yen, more than the paddy had earned in the previous 15 years combined. Emmy came to see the rice brought in, said little, and did not mention the sale papers again. Sato came by that week, hat in hand, and asked, not quite meeting Haruto's eyes, whether the ducks could be sourced through him too, for a corner of his own field next spring. Fujimori didn't come by at all. Word reached the valley weeks later that Neon Kai Agricultural Holdings had quietly dropped its interest in Kuretani. That evening, going back through the diary one more time, Haruto found a last page he'd missed, folded flat against the back cover. It wasn't about ducks, or rice, or money. It was addressed to him. He read it standing at the edge of the paddy, where the light had gone gold and still over water his grandfather had once given up on. "You always thought you weren't enough," his grandfather had written. "You were always exactly enough. I just never said it while I could."